As you have seen so far that we have been using S3 APIs to upload objects, create directories, delete objects, etc. So like in our case, we have been using the AWS CLI. And if you use, let's say, a program, you'd be using the APIs anyway. But let's say you want to simplify the operation. You have an EC2 instance wherein you want to use the Unix file system operations to do upload objects, deletion of objects, etc. So to simplify that, S3 provides something called S3 Mountpoint, and it is a software. What it does is that it converts those Unix commands to S3 APIs. So let's say we have EC2 instance and S3 bucket, and so far we have been using AWS S3 copy command, AWS S3 MV command, etc. to do operations with the S3 bucket. So we used AWS S3 CP to copy from S3 bucket to the local file system. Then we used S3 CP command to copy from local file system to S3 bucket also, and across S3 buckets also. Similarly, we can use AWS S3 MV, AWS S3 RM, etc. Now, instead of that, if you use S3 mount point, the bucket is mounted as a local file system in EC2. So we have the EC2 instance and we have S3 bucket. Now this S3 bucket will be mounted as a local file system in the EC2 instance. Now this is basically a software, and this connects the local file system mounting with the S3 bucket behind the scenes. Now we can run Unix commands like mv, cp, rm, etc. And these commands can be run on the local file system. And what S3 mount point software would do, it would convert the Unix commands to S3 API calls. So all these OS calls will be translated to S3 API calls automatically. And of course, you can use these Unix level commands to do these operations. Now, do we use move, mv, cp, rm commands a lot? Actually, no. The use case of S3 mount point is for read heavy workloads. So if you are using copy command a lot, if you are reading the file a lot, so let's say you have an application running in EC2 instance and that application reads a lot of files or a lot of objects from S3. So in that case, what you can do is you can use the S3 mount point and then use the OS level calls to read objects from S3 buckets. Now the steps is that we'll have to install the mount point because it is a software, and then we'll have to mount the S3 bucket as a local file system in the EC2 instance. And we can configure caching also. Caching means that let's say an object is read multiple times. What you can do is that instead of reading it every time from S3 bucket, you can temporarily store it in the EC2 file system also, other than S3, which can be either instance store or EBS volumes. So in that case, no more API calls would be needed. So if you mention caching and you, let's say, use the cp command or open command or something like that, then S3 mount point would look at the local cache, and if the file or the object is available in the local cache, it would be returned to the application. Otherwise, it would be read from S3 bucket. As usual, let's look this in action. And we have this 3IAM S3 bucket. So I have retail folder and S3 server access logs. And I also have this EC2 instance up and running. What I'll do is that I will create a file system in this EC2 instance. So I'll log into the EC2 instance. I'll have to install the S3 mount point software, and then I'll install or basically mount the S3 bucket, which is 3IAM S3 bucket, as a local file system in this EC2 instance. So let's log into the EC2 instance first. And what will I do is that I'll create a directory, and the name of the directory would be 3IAM S3 local fs. Now this directory has been created, 3IAM S3 local fs. And now what will I do is that I'll install the S3 mount point software, and then I'll mount that bucket with this directory. And this is the command to install. Remember, there's a tar file also. Do not use the tar file to download the S3 software. Better to use the RPM installation. So as we can see, this mount S3 RPM has been installed, has been downloaded rather. Now I'll install it. So I'm installing the mount. So the installation is complete. Now let me go ahead and mount the file. and this is the command sudo mount s3 3iam s3 bucket, and it seems like it has been mounted. Let's see whether the mounting was done correctly or not. And the mounting has not been done correctly because we are seeing question marks here. Now if you find some error like this, first you have to unmount the file system again, and to unmount use this umount command, so which is sudo umount 3iam local fs. So now the unmounting would be done. Now let me tell you why this error happened. So as you can see, I am using this sudo command to mount this file system. And what sudo means? Sudo means that I'm running the command as root. So as I'm using root to mount the file system, but I am logged in as EC2 user. So that's why I can see these question marks here, as I have not logged in using root. So if I log in using root, there should not be any question mark. So you should not use this sudo mount s3. You should use just the mount -s3 command, and now it will be mounted as local file system. And if you do ls lhrt, as you can see, the file system has been mounted and there are no question marks here, which means there's no error. Okay, so now I can go inside of this folder, and if I do ls-l, it shows me a directory which is retail and then s3 server access logs, which are the folders inside of the s3 bucket. I can also go inside of retail folder, and I should be able to see the files which are already there. So as you can see, I have this orders to CSV and order streaming file CSV, and I can use, let's say, this head 5 command to look at the data in the file. So now what it means is that I'm using the Unix commands, operating system commands, to do operations in the bucket. So now let me go back, and I have a lot of files. So I have this customer underscore 2.csv, seller underscore 2.csv. What will I do is I'll copy this customer underscore 2.csv to the bucket 3iam in the folder retail. So see, I'm not using AWS S3 API or AWS S3 CP command. I'm using Linux copy command here. So once that is complete, because the size is pretty big, it is 5.6 GB, I would be able to see that this particular file has been copied to this folder. All right, the copy has been done. Let's look at the S3 bucket in the folder. So if I refresh, I can see customer underscore 2 in this particular folder in 3iam S3 bucket. Now what will I do is I'll remove this orders to CSV file, and let me try to copy that file from the bucket to the current directory. So now what it will do, it will copy from the bucket to this local directory, and you can use it for data engineering also. So let's say you have some data engineering program running in an EC2 instance. Let's say you're running Flink or Spark on EC2 instead of EMR, and then you can use the Mountpoint to read the files from S3 using the directory commands. Now one more thing is that, can we mount a directory bucket? So this is the directory bucket that we have, 3iam s3 directory bucket. So what will I do is I'll go ahead and create another directory. I have created this directory 3iam s3 directory bucket fs, and let me use the mount s3 command to mount this directory, or this bucket, sorry, to the recently created directory, which is 3iam s3 directory bucket. So as you can see that it does not allow to mount a directory bucket. We can only mount general purpose buckets using the S3 mount point.